Well, Jim, I was just thinking the fact that we had this bomb scare here on 34th Street right next to us an hour or so ago. It was a hoax, of course. We've, of course, seen the tragic figures in lower Manhattan, the continuing rescue efforts, what happened at the Pentagon, and just a moment ago, this very thorough report on the investigation. And the fact that these suspects, who are now believed to have been involved in these terrorist attacks, were operating and living so freely here in the United States, brings us to the subject of fear, of anxiety, mounting fear of anxiety, which is perhaps natural. How do we confront it, and what is it? Where is the enemy? Is he or she out there? Is it within us here in the United States, or indeed in ourselves? So here are some thoughts about fear and how we're going to confront it.
The parallel has been drawn between these sneak attacks in 2001 and the one on Pearl Harbor in 1941, and how both were
a date which will live in infamy.
Except that 60 years ago, President Roosevelt and the nation knew who the enemy was. And since the enemy in Asia and Europe in World War II wasn't hiding, the full weight of American power could be mobilized to achieve victory. Half a century later, the United States could do it again against an enemy who couldn't hide. But now the face of the enemy is invisible, if not as terror and destruction. And we discover the advantage an enemy has who can choose the time, place, and weapons of war. That is what happened in Vietnam, where superior American military strength was inferior to the tactics of a largely invisible enemy and its willingness to take casualties. And the enemy is not always found in war. One of the greatest tests to face Americans was the Great Depression. Americans were fearful about their future in 1933 when Franklin Roosevelt warned that the invisible enemy was within.
Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. Nameless, unreasoning, unjustified terror, which paralyzes needed effort to convert retreat into advance.
And advancing is where we are right now in the United States, not just in the rescue efforts or the investigation to find out who was responsible, but also in recognizing that the very fear of terrorism can become the enemy.
And perhaps that is nothing more than inevitable in this new era we seem to be in, where the front line in international conflict can be anywhere, including the Pentagon or right here in lower Manhattan. Colleen, back to you.